This is Big Tasty Sports.
I'm back with Yanni for another week of the DFS Huddle, talking through DraftKings lineups, pricing, all that stuff to find the spots where hopefully we can have the lineup that makes not the $3 or the $10, but like the $100 or the $1,000, right, Yanni? That's the goal.
I mean, I wouldn't mind winning the Millie Maker. I'd be okay with that.
Also, Millie Maker would work too. I guess that betrays some of the contests I'm playing when I put it that way. So
there you go.
Well, hey, we're going to jump in and do like we always do, go through these tiers at the different positions, talk stacks and who we like, all that stuff as we go, build out a lineup or two at the end. Before we jump in, just a reminder, as always, to please go follow at Yanni_bet and at the Bet Crushers on X. Also follow at Big Tasty Sports. If you want to follow me personally, that's at NBA Attack. And then also check out the websites, betcrushers.com, bigtastysports.com. I know we're both posting video content. We're doing written content, all that kind of stuff. So that's an easy way to just stay up to date on what both of us are doing. Plus, with Bet Crushers, you get even more than just Yanni. You get JJ doing racing and all kinds of different stuff. So go do that. Like the video, subscribe. All right, now we'll jump in. Let's start with the quarterbacks, Yanni. As we always do, let's go. Actually, let me look. I always start with 7,000 and up, but I forget. Yeah, there's not enough people. Let's do 6,500 and up, which is still a small tier, but let's do 6,500 and up for quarterbacks.
Well, I think we have to start with your matchup of the weekend, which would be the Bears and Vikings. And I think you look at both of those guys. Fields, obviously, the last 2 weeks has played well. Even when Fields doesn't play well, sometimes he still can put fantasy points up, as we know. So whether he plays well or not, he's likely to get some points. And then obviously that Bears defense we know is not good. So Kirk Cousins should have some success against them. Of course, we'll talk about it more, I'm sure. No Justin Jefferson, which certainly impacts Cousins. But I think in this matchup, this could be one of those situations where you're getting a Viking stack at a cheaper price because you don't have to factor in Jefferson, and you may not lose a ton of production because of the matchup with the Bears. So I think, for me, it's like those are the guys you got to look at this week at the top.
Yeah, we'll see as we go here. I'm kind of tempted to just fade the whole top with quarterbacks this week. There's nothing that jumps out to me like, oh, I got to have that. But I agree with you that both sides of that Vikings game are intriguing. I think the Vikings side is intriguing because Jefferson's not there, like you said. And also, like I said before we jumped on, this might be Cousins' last stand before they start tanking full on or something, depending on how this game goes. But I mean, Cousins has had the production there, right? And he can distribute the ball too. I don't think he's reliant on Jefferson to be able to produce. And man, Fields could have a field day running the ball if he'll get out and do it. And he's been throwing the deep ball better. I still, watching those games, feel like he's missing screen passes by like 2 yards, but the deep balls seem to be kind of okay, I guess. So yeah, I agree. That's where you got to look. All right, let's drop down to the mid tier then, and let's take 55 or like 5,600 and up. So 5,600 to 6,500. Anything you like in there?
I'm not sold just yet on Joe Burrow off of one performance. Obviously, it's a nice matchup for him. He could have a huge day. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on Burrow yet. But Matt Stafford, on the other hand, absolutely favorable matchup. He's got Cooper Kupp back, who looks like he didn't miss a step from that hamstring injury. Obviously, with Puka Nacua there, now he's got two bona fide number one type receivers, basically, not to mention, obviously, the other weapons. So I think Stafford and the Rams are a very interesting stack this weekend. In fact, that's probably my favorite offensive stack out there.
Yeah, same. So I have a number of guys written down. I have one guy starred, and that's Stafford. That I think is where I want to start. I built out some lineups with other guys as well. I think you brought up Burrow. I think maybe he's worth a shot, depending on how many lineups you're playing. At 6,300, that's a huge discount if he's anything like Joe Burrow.
Yep.
And so I think if you're building multiple lineups, it's worth taking a shot there at this price point because it's not going to stay there if he actually is back and better.
Right.
And I think we talked about it on the show on Monday some, but it did look like he was at least moving around a little bit better in this past game. So maybe the calf is improving some. All right. Well, that's pretty quick, but I think I'm on the same page. Not a ton to look at there. Let's go 5,500 and below. Any cheap guys this week that you think are worth playing?
I think so. I mean, I think that you could look at a guy, and it sounds crazy, but Baker Mayfield, they're likely to be trailing in that game. Could mean some throws there. He's played well. I don't think that I don't know that I mean, I don't know that Mayfield's ever going to put up those monster numbers. So if you're looking for those deep contests, maybe you steer away from him. But if you're in some of the smaller contests, Mayfield could be a decent value play there. But I think really the guy that I would look at here is Gardner Minshew. He's at 5,000. He's basically the lowest option there. And he has proven when he gets in there, he makes plays. He throws touchdowns, he moves the ball, and they have a good matchup. So, I mean, I think when you look at that, Minshew, not to mention for whatever it's worth, it's a revenge game, but I think, he's playing a team that's better at stopping the run, going to kind of force him to pass. I think Minshew's a great option this week.
Yeah, I've got two guys I like down here, and I'm going to throw up in my mouth a little bit saying one of them, but Minshew is definitely one. I mean, at that price point, I think you got to look there. This guy's a competent NFL quarterback. And so I really do like that one. The other one is Bryce Young. And it's hard for me to say that, but they're going to be playing again. He's going to have to throw the ball. Now that doesn't mean he can throw the ball, but if you look at his passer rating and some of his stats over the last number of weeks, it is improving. It doesn't mean that he's phenomenal, but the Dolphins defense isn't phenomenal either. And so I think there is a chance you get some interceptions if you go to Bryce Young, but Carolina's receiving core, though it's not good, is getting healthy again too. So he's going to have theoretically more than just Adam Thielen. And so I don't love it, but man, at 5,100 in a game that should be high scoring, at least on one side, that's the other guy I'm considering. Am I totally insane for that, Yanni?
I mean,
you can tell me, it's fine. We've been hanging out for a while.
Logically speaking, I get it, and look, when a team's trailing by 30 points, which is likely to happen in this game, possible to happen in this game, you usually are going to get some garbage yards. So yeah, I mean, this could be one of those games where you look at the stat line at the end, you're like, oh, Young threw for 295 yards and threw a couple touchdowns. I can't get there yet with Young here. I get what you're saying, game script, and you're right too. He has basically improved every week. Now, obviously, still not great, and like you said, weapons are still mediocre.
It's less trash.
Right. That's kind of it. So I can't get there with him, but if you're trying to go cheap at the quarterback position, and for whatever reason you don't want Minshew, or you want to have some variety if you're playing multiple lineups, there's worse options out there of what you can do for sure.
Yeah, I think one way I think about this too is it's an interesting way to me to stack up that game potentially too, especially if you think the running backs are going to do some work for Miami. So you drop down $2,500 from Tua, hope that he doesn't throw all over the place, but then you probably could get Hill and Mostert in there, right, along with like Young and Thielen or something like that. So that's part of the thought process there too, is it's a way to get into that game without taking Tua, I guess.
Yep.
I sound like I'm trying to defend myself. I'm not. I'm okay being crazy.
You kind of have to, but if you feel that way, you have to state why. And I think that's what you did. I mean, you made a nice case for Bryce Young. Now, whether or not people will have the stones to actually do it, I don't know. But I mean, you made the case. I'm
going to put that on my tombstone. You made a good case for Bryce Young. That's going to be.
We'll revisit this one in a week, and we'll see if you. I mean,
right, exactly. I might have to play the lineup just so I could have bragging rights if by some chance it would hit. So
there you go. Yep.
All right, let's move on from Bryce Young to running backs. And here I am going to have a start, even though it's a relatively small tier. We're going to start with that $7,000 and up. Are there guys that you're paying up for at running back this week?
No, there's not. And, David Montgomery's been solid, but at that price point against a pretty good Tampa defense, I don't want to pay it. I think he'll have a decent game, but I'm not paying it. This is one week where I think even at his price point, you can almost always consider McCaffrey because he's so
Right.
steady and good with what he does. But if there's a bad matchup for McCaffrey, this is probably it. So do I want to spend $9,500 if he ends up with 80 yards? Even if he gets you 85 yards and a touchdown for $9,500, I'm not doing it. So
It's so
anyways, I
expensive.
don't really love anything. I don't love Bijan Robinson. ETN is kind of interesting, but I don't love him. He seems to kind of be a little bit boom or bust, meaning he doesn't seem to get a little bit going unless maybe at the end of the game he busts one. That's what he did with Indy last time. So I don't know. Bottom line is I don't really love anybody in this upper tier.
We're on the same page, man. I'm going to keep it. I'm fading this entire top tier. Obviously, there's good players up there. They could have good weeks, but I'm just going to fade the whole top.
Yep.
All right, let's go 5,500 to 7,000 then. This middle range is one where there is quite a bit more that I like. Are you on the same page here?
100%. I think this is where you spend your money this week, in my opinion.
Yep.
Here, I think there's a lot of good options. I like Alvin Kamara this week. I think he's definitely a play. I love Kenneth Walker here. I think he has a nice game against Cincinnati. They have not been great stopping the run. And then I actually have in my article I published, and really the only reason I didn't have Matt Stafford is because I've used him once already, and I don't like to reuse the same guy. But his running back Kyron Williams, I think he is in line for a huge game because I think the Rams take care of business in this game. So I think he's going to get a lot of work. And what I like this week, he's been a touchdown basically machine the first 5 weeks of the season. Hasn't had a ton of production as far as yardage goes. But I think this is the week that you get both out of him. I think he finds the end zone and he's able to rack up some yards in this game. So I love Williams. And then I think the only problem I have here is I think everybody in America or North America or whoever plays DFS, everybody's going to be on Raheem Mostert. And that's the only reason, like, I don't see how you pass on Mostert this week. Like, you have to play him. The problem is everybody's going to be playing him, though. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, fear of missing out. You're like, okay, if I don't play Mostert, he's going to end up with 4 touchdowns and I'm going to lose. But if you play him, everybody else has him too. So Mostert's kind of the question mark for me. But I mean, I think he's going to have a monster game here. And then if you want to keep going further, because I know you said 50, I think you said 5,500, right?
55. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've talked about DeAndre Swift kind of being a considerable start every week. I think here's no different. I think they take care of business against the Jets, and the Jets are not as good against the run right now as they are against the pass. So I think Swift's an option. And then I obviously have been critical of him, but your guy Madison, I think you can put him even in a passing Viking stack as a running back because he also catches the ball as well. And I understand that Cam Akers got some carries last week. And who knows, they may work him in even more, but the matchup's just too good against that Bears defense. It's hard to not consider putting a guy at $5,600 who has such a spicy matchup there.
Yeah, he does. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the backfield this week. We, again, are largely on the same page. I think I had pretty much all of the same people written down that you said. The ones that are starred for me are Kamara, Williams, Swift. And the only reason Mostert isn't starred is just what you said of like, man, if I'm going to get different, I mean, I can play Mostert, but I got to do something else different then.
Right.
I also did have Mixon written down. I think that's an okay matchup for him against Seattle. I probably won't play him because I'm just not a huge fan of what Mixon's doing so far this year. But just to say one name different than all the ones you just ran off, that was the other one I had written down. So I think we're really on the same page there. I like Kamara a ton this week. He's probably my number one running back. And then I'm with you on Williams. I think he's like 1A, number 2 for me of the people that I really want to get into my lineups. For me, it's going to be the issue of, do I play him with Stafford or am I going to get him into lineups where Stafford's not playing, which is probably more likely.
Sure. Yep.
So, all right, let's drop down to the bottom tier. And I know we've got some starters and then others as we go down, but let's drop down below 5,500. I actually have some places I think are okay to look this week. How about you?
I would say the only one that I really, am considering playing is Tyler Algier. And we've talked about him before. They mentioned with some of what Bijan Robinson, they actually said they want to get Algier going in the running game. So I think we could see, and he got some usage last week as well. I think in this matchup, that's probably going to be some running. Now, obviously, we know Robinson's going to get a bulk of that, so we got to worry about that. But I think Algier at whatever he is, where did he go here? I lost him. 4,600.
4,600.
Yeah, 4,600. I mean, to me, I think that's certainly an option. And then depending upon some of these are injury status relevant here, but D'Onta Foreman could be an option if the Bears backfield is thin. We know Herbert's probably going to be out. I think it's questionable as far as the rookie Rashawn Johnson there. Looks like Travis Homer's probably out. So if that is the case, I think all of a sudden he becomes a guy that you can absolutely lean on at $4,400. Only reason, and Foreman's a guy that's produced when he's had opportunities. So in his previous stops, when he gets on the field, he produces. This year he's kind of like buried on the depth chart, but if he happens to leap because of those injuries, that's a very nice play, I think.
Yeah, I want to hear if you have anyone else, but I agree on Foreman, man. Like I feel like every NFL podcast or whatever I listen to, people are kind of crapping on him, and I'm like, man, when he's gotten an opportunity, he's been just fine. He did great in Carolina last year when he got the opportunity. So I'm with you. If Johnson and Herbert are both out this week for Chicago, at 4,400, I think that's definitely a reasonable play.
Yeah, and I think Herbert's. I think he's officially out.
I think you're right. I think Herbert is out. I think Johnson's still questionable, but doubtful. It sounds like
maybe because I think he's in concussion protocol, right?
Oh, okay. Is that what it is? Which the way things have gone this year, he probably misses a game if he's in concussion protocol.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you check the injury report, if those guys are out, I think he's. At 4,400, he's a guy you got to slot in there.
Yeah. That could even be a good spot of whether you want to put him with Fields and then stack up some of the Vikings, or you want to play Cousins, stack the Vikings, and come back with Foreman. That could be a fine look.
Yeah, I agree.
You have anybody all the way down at the bottom, or is that it?
You can consider a guy like Chuba Hubbard. Obviously they're going to be behind. He's a little more of their pass catching back, I think. So, you could look at guys like that, but there's nobody that I'm like looking at on that list. I don't think even if he comes back and plays, and I'm looking right now, I don't think you can consider like a Jeff Wilson, even though he may get some run, just because I think Salvon Ahmed will get some run there. And I think, Mostert will obviously take the bulk. So that's a long way of saying no, besides Algier and maybe Foreman there. It's hard to find a lot I like there. I don't know about you, if you found some gems there.
Maybe, but I also suggested playing Bryce Young, so I don't know how much you want to listen to anything that I have to say today, but so some similar ones, but I like Algier, number one. He was back up to 17 carries last week, so I think the workload could be there for him. We talk about Bijan getting the bulk of the work, but actually last week, at least, that wasn't really the case. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I don't necessarily want to go to Bijan, because I don't know how much work he's going to get. Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is someone to consider at 5,400 going against the Raiders. That's a really good matchup for running backs. And New England, Mac Jones sure isn't going to do anything, or at least it hasn't happened recently. So that's a guy I was high on coming into the year, and certainly he's been very disappointing. If there is a week for him to have a good week, I feel like this could be one. DeMercado with Connor out in Arizona. Mostly, I don't know hardly anything about him. I just looked up who's the next Cardinals running back, and he's 4,900. I probably won't play him because I don't know anything about him, but I will consider taking a shot on Akers. I still just have the feeling that's going to change, and I could be wrong. I was wrong the first week when I said it, so maybe I'll keep being wrong. But I don't know. I don't feel great about Madison. And then the other one that's really a long shot, and I think you'd have to do more research than I've done to this point, but that's Chris Brooks from Miami at 4,000. From what I see, he's the backup. Now, I know you talked about Ahmed, or Ahmed, I don't know how you say it, and he looked really good in the preseason, there's no doubt. But it seemed like Brooks is functioning as the backup. And so if you got the sense that for sure he was, look at the way that they do split up some carries. And I think that would be a way to, if you wanted to really get different and you're pretty sure that he is going to be the number 2 there, you could not play Mostert and play Brooks and hope that even the game is so out of control that they just don't play Mostert as much, and he ends up getting a decent amount of carries. So it's kind of like game script dependent and dependent on making sure he actually is the backup. But
yeah,
that
and
was the other one I thought.
you may know more than I do on that. I mean, I have a feeling that because of the opponent, coming off of injury, this is going to be a game with obviously with A-Chain out. I think that Jeff Wilson's going to get a few carries. This will kind of be his preseason type game where they give him a few totes just to get, knock the rust off. And then the question becomes is Brooks kind of the guy that's in there? Is it Ahmed? Is it both? I don't know the answer to that, well enough to say. I think that's my hesitation on those backups in Miami. I just don't have enough clarity there.
Do you know for sure that he's back?
Wilson?
Yeah.
I don't. It said he practiced today. He was a limited practice, and they did take him off injured reserve. So, he's eligible to play.
Okay.
My thought is, again, with the opponent, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 3 carries. They kind of just work him in to get him a little whatever. But if he gets 3 and Ahmed gets 3 or 4, there may not be a lot left over for, Brooks or whoever at that point.
I may just do a little more research there, because I think if there is someone in Miami, let's say Wilson doesn't play, and if either of those guys, there's a sense that they are truly the number 2, I think it could be worth a shot on one of those second running backs in Miami. But if you're really not sure and there's 3 guys back there, you can't.
That's my concern. I just don't have enough knowledge to know. I'm afraid I'd put one of those guys in and they don't see any work.
Yeah, I definitely think you need to be sure of the role, or as sure as you can be, if you're going to take any shots there.
Right.
Okay. Let's move on from running back and go to wide receiver. This is where, at least for me, my list gets a little bit longer of guys that I like this week. We are going to start with the 7,500 and up. We've got a decent group of guys there. Who do you want to target here?
I think, to me, it's a little bit stack dependent, but I mean, I don't mind paying up for Kupp and Nakua on the same roster here with Stafford. Obviously, that doesn't leave you a lot of capital going the rest of the way. So you have to understand that and make sure you can find, whether it's a Dante Foreman or someone, that you can fill in the blanks with. But I mean, I like those guys. I think they're both going to have big days for the Rams there. And I mean, we've seen Chase become very active the last 2 weeks, obviously with Burrow feeling better, a concerted effort there. I think Higgins is kind of 50-50-ish, it sounds like, to go this week. But
I think so.
Either way, I mean, Seattle has given up a lot of yardage already, throwing the football, touchdowns. And with Chase, I mean, you can consider that. It's a hefty price tag, but you can definitely consider it. And beyond that, I don't necessarily, what was the cutoff point you used? I'm sorry.
75.
So yeah, definitely don't love anybody else besides there.
Okay. Yeah, we're pretty much, I love that Ram stack as well. And I do think there are some ways to be able to get there that are still okay. At least when I was building lineups earlier, that's my favorite place to start. I'll even say is with those 3. Now, I wonder if that's going to be true for a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of ownership on that stack. So that's something to think about. I would consider Hill, although, man, I'm just wondering if this game is such a blowout. Although he can do it in a half is the problem, right? I mean, he can put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in a half. So Hill is someone I would consider if I was in another stack where I had the money. I don't know if I would target him as a starting place this week. Yeah, and then Burrow. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well said. I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Burrow Chase was my other one that I would consider. So I think we're kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, we're going to find a place to argue here soon. All right. Let's go 5,500 to 7,500.
Sure. A guy who I wasn't high on going into the season, more because of his quarterback. But DJ Moore is starting to connect a little bit with Fields. I mentioned that if you want to get involved in that Bears and Vikings game, if you're going to play Fields, I think you got to play Moore. And I do think you could play Moore as a standalone as well. He's kind of right on that range between big money and not. He's at 6,500, so he's not going to break the bank. He is a little pricey, but again, pretty good matchup in the last 2 weeks. He's been on it. So you can look at him. I I think we've talked about this. Ayuk is a play for me potentially every week. Now, he has a tough matchup on the road in Cleveland, but the price point at 6,200, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get there with him this week. If it were almost any other matchup, I probably would, but because it's a tough matchup, I'll probably stay away on that there. But I do like, I think Michael Pittman he's had one down week. Other than that, he's been pretty consistent. Because of Minshew, I like him. I think Minshew can get him the ball more than Richardson can and will look his way more. And then also, if you're playing Minshew, I think you stack Pittman with him as he's still the number one option there. And then I would say the only, the other, you said 5,500, right?
5,500. Yep.
Yeah. I think the other two, I think you can consider Jacoby Myers. So he is getting a lot of those secondary looks beyond Devontae Adams. And there's two things we look at here. I'm not going to talk about a revenge game with New England because I don't know how much that means, but he's playing a team he's familiar with that's short on corners. So we know Bill Belichick likes to take away the number one weapon. In this case, that's Devontae Adams. He's going to pay a lot of attention there. I think Myers could have a pretty nice game here. So I think you can look him. And then a guy we've talked about a lot here, Nico Collins, 5,600. He's averaging 19.1 fantasy points. That's higher than a lot of the guys ahead of him in the salary. So I think he's a guy that you can look at. Now, I know with Collins, it can be a little hit or miss, but I mean, to me, when you look at the potential return on investment for the price that you're paying, you got to consider him.
Man, we're finally going to be on some different guys here, but I like it. It gives more to think about. I like that call on Jacoby Myers. I've really liked Jacoby Myers all year.
He's played well.
He's played well. He's getting targeted a lot. And I like what you said about Belichick probably trying to take Adams away. So I love that. I love that call. So we did have some of the same people written down. I definitely had DJ Moore written down, had Ayuk. But here's a couple that I'm interested. One is in going back to Calvin Ridley. And the reason why, and I'm not going to pretend I came up with this, but on another podcast, I heard them talking about how what Indianapolis struggles the most with are those receivers on the edge.
Yep.
And it's been true every game. And you look back to the game where Ridley went off was when they played Indianapolis. Because he hasn't been targeted as much, he's only 6,700. And this is a guy who has the upside of a Cup or a Chase or some of those guys if he gets the targets. So he's one of my favorite one-off receivers, even if I need one in this range at 6,700. I also like Thielen. And man, I was dead. I mean, I just thought Thielen was dust and it was going to be nothing this year. And he's just getting targeted a ton. I mean, I pulled it up here and he had the 2 targets week 1, but since then it's been 9, 14, 8, and 13.
Yeah.
And so again, if we think this is a game where they're trailing, they're going to have to throw a lot. And the Dolphins defense isn't especially great. I think Thielen at 5,900 is probably going to get a lot of targets and could really come through. So he's another one that I like in this range. Those, I would say those are the 2 big ones outside of the ones you said that I'm really interested in looking to.
Yeah. I can't fault you for either of those. I think you bring up good points on both. Ridley, especially just in terms of the defensive scheme and that. I mean, like you said, historical. We only have to go back 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, to see what we saw. Yeah. So I hear you.
Yeah. All right. Let's. This one we will do the very bottom. So let's do 4,000 up to 5,500. Still, I think some reasonable plays here. What are you thinking in this range?
Yeah, I think there's a few people you can look at. And let me just start towards the bottom here and see who was on the list there. And none of those guys, but I think so. Injury dependent. It looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be back. So I don't know that this is a play. If for whatever reason he's not, Khalif Raymond, I think, is an option, but I think St. Brown's going to be back. But I actually think DJ Chark is for similar reasons to what you stated with Thielen. Now that you said he's getting healthy in there in a game again where they're trailing, I think you can look at that. If you play Minshew, a guy I think you've mentioned it before is Downs. If you're playing Minshew, I think you can stack that. He's a guy who seems to be getting more and more familiar. But in this one, I think is probably, it kind of falls into line with Mostert. but KJ Osborne to me is like a must play this week. I mean, and maybe the rest of the world's thinking the same thing. So 50% of the people are going to own him, and I'm not going to gain any ground, and that's possible. But $4,400 for a guy who I think is going to get a lot of targets this week. When he's had opportunities, he's made plays. Matchup is favorable, especially if you're going to play Cousins or play that Vikings-Bears game. Even if you're not, I know as I was creating some lineups, it's like, I got to find a guy in that $4,500 range. I kept coming back to Osborne. I just think, with Jefferson out, he just becomes like a must play at that price point.
Yeah, I agree with you. Osborne is a good athlete. He's a good route runner. He's had a couple drops here and there, but most receivers do. And at 4,400, especially Addison is questionable too. And I'm actually not convinced that Addison's ready to take on the role of being the guy in this offense. I think he needs to be sort of a secondary piece for this year in terms of what I've seen from him. So I'm with you on Osborne. I think he's a really good play this week.
Yeah.
Anybody else in that range, or was that it for you?
No, the only other guy, and actually, you may have talked me out of him, is Christian Kirk, because he's at 5,400.
Yeah.
And, I think I know Zay Jones will be out. So I think that gives a little more, targets to Ridley and Kirk. But I think you bring up a good point. Kirk is more of the slot guy. Ridley's more of the outside guy. And when you talk about scheme, it's like, you know what? Maybe Kirk isn't the play here. Maybe you're better if you're going to play that, pay the extra money and get the outside guy. So you may have talked me off of Kirk there.
Yeah. I think that's where I would be at for this week. But it's whoever you said this about recently, it's like in any other matchup, Kirk at 5,400, absolutely. Right. Give me that. Like that's phenomenal. It's just the matchup this week.
Yeah.
I'm with you on Downs. That was another one that I had starred. I like this guy. And he's showing that I like that he can catch the ball down the field some, so you can get some explosive plays with him. And I like Pittman still too. I think I said this on our other show, but I kind of like what's coming together in Indianapolis in terms of the offensive weapons. They're now it's not like top tier in the league, but I kind of thought it would be nothing. And we're starting to see like, okay, they've got some kind of okay guys. And I think Josh Downs is one of those kind of okay guys.
It's amazing what offensive line play and running the ball can do, because all of a sudden this Indianapolis offense that couldn't do anything a year ago, you look now and it's like, boy, they're running the ball well. And then, now all of a sudden you've got these receivers that you're right. They may not be the best in the league, but now that teams have to kind of respect that running game, it's like these guys get single coverage, they can get open in zone, all that kind of stuff. So I'm with you. I think, again, if you're playing Minshew, I mean, I think absolutely you're playing, if not both Colts receivers, you're playing at least one of those guys.
Yep. The only other one I had some other names written down, but the only other one I had starred was Hollywood Brown. Yeah. And I like that LA game, and he's been getting targets. I mean, he's had 10 targets in 3 games, and then he had 5 and 7 in the other one. So, and this Rams secondary, I think, is a secondary that you can pick on a little bit. So I don't think it's a bad spot for him. I don't know that I'll look to him a ton just in terms of a one-off, but if I'm stacking the Rams, I really don't mind him as the piece coming back from the Cardinals.
Yeah, I get it.
All right, well, let's dumpster dive all the way down to the bottom. Anybody that you are willing to play below $4,000?
I don't think so. I mean, you look at, I'm just kind of looking through here again. Where was he? If T. Higgins does not go, so again, injury dependent, Trenton Irwin is a guy that you can look at. I mean, he had 7 catches a week ago in Higgins' place. So again, favorable matchup against a defense that hasn't, defended the pass very well. Again, totally Higgins dependent though, when you look at that there. And I think that's, where was the other one? I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot there that I can really even find.
Okay. I've got 3. I'm always open to playing Rashid Shaheed, especially at $3,700.
Yeah.
He for me is more I need a guy that's $3,700. I think he's playable. He can come up with a decent game for you. The other 2, and these are a little bit speculative, but one is Rondale Moore in Arizona. one of the things that I also heard this week that I think is interesting, and you think about the way that some of these teams will use, now he's no Deebo Samuel, don't get me wrong, but just for comparison's sake, they find ways to get Deebo the ball. And I think with James Conner out, it's possible that he even gets some carries here in sort of a more creative style of offense. So it's not just him having to catch some passes, because he's sort of that Wan'Dale Robinson, I'll catch it for -1 yard and end up back at the line of scrimmage. But man, if he could get some carries here too, with Conner out at 3,500, he's so cheap. And then the other one that I want to make sure I have his first name right, which he's on my my squad, so I should. Brandon Powell, $3,000. This is a guy that last week when Jefferson went down, they started to look to some. He's got some speed, he's got some quickness, and if he's going to end up being the slot guy or sort of the third receiver, I'm not saying he's going to go off or get a ton of opportunity, but he's $3,000. Yeah. So this to me is, and I'm not saying it worked out last time, but this is sort of the Wan'Dale Robinson look to me of, if you have a lineup you love and you need a piece to get in there, I think that you have a chance with Powell at $3,000 to score enough points that you're okay. Yeah, so that's the other one I'd consider.
Interesting.
All right. Let's go to tight end, and as always, we will just take the whole thing here. Who do you want to play at tight end this week?
You would think that Hawkinson would have a huge game. The last 2 weeks he's been very mediocre, and I think disappointingly mediocre, because I think especially last week he probably should have had a bigger game, and he really didn't. He caught a few passes at the end, ended up with like 50 yards. He should have a big game, but I don't love the fact for Hawkinson that Jefferson is out. It could mean that he gets 15 targets and catches 12 passes. Very possible. We've seen him do that before, but I think he actually benefits from Jefferson. So I don't know that I could pony up for Hawkinson, even though he should have a really nice game. I mean, when you look at Goddard, I mean, he came on for kind of the first time this year last week. He finally kind of had a quote unquote breakout game from a fantasy perspective. And at least from fantasy rankings, the Jets are dead last defending tight ends. So you got a guy who we know he's capable. He came on last week and he's got a good matchup. I think you can certainly consider Goddard. I worry now after the first month of the season with Goddard that there just aren't enough opportunities for him to go around, because they're running the ball more with Swift. We know AJ Brown's getting his targets. Devontae Smith's still there. So I don't have enough confidence that Goddard's going to get it done week in and week out. Could he? Absolutely. This could be a huge game, but I'm not there. So I think the guy that I really like the best this week, and he actually, at least from an opposition standpoint, has a favorable matchup as well, is Logan Thomas. He's at 3,500. As I mentioned, Atlanta's 31st fantasy-wise defending tight ends. When he's been on the field, and Logan Thomas he's an injury-prone guy. He's had injuries his whole time there. But when he's on the field, he produces, and Sam Howell looks his way a lot. His target share is up there. I mean, so much to the fact that at some point they're going to have to start telling him throw the ball to McLaurin and Dotson, because he's going to Thomas so much. But I think, again, when you look at, let's just say Hawkinson, for example, at 6,600, do I have confidence that he's going to greatly outperform Logan Thomas at 3,500? No. I mean, I think he's could
got to double him up, basically.
That's it. So, I think for me, he's really the guy that I'm looking at. To be honest, from the tight end position, for me, it's Logan Thomas or bust this week. The lineups that I have done, I've got him in there and I'm counting on him. So obviously, if he doesn't perform, I'm going to be really upset. But I do think that this is a week, again, good matchup. I think he's going to have some nice production in this game.
Yeah, Logan Thomas is my favorite one too. I just think the upside on him at the price is crazy. And Atlanta's defense is fine, but you pointed out the matchup against tight ends. And also, I think we're back on this place after the game with Chicago, where Washington is bad, but they're not as bad as people think they are. I mean, Sam Howell will hold the ball too long. He's been getting sacked because of that and stuff. But we've also seen times, it was Denver. Denver's terrible, but Washington's offense can produce at times. And I think Logan Thomas is probably a big part of it if they do. So the upside there to me is really significant. for $3,500.
When you see, I mean, and again, we're only 5 weeks into the season, but I mean, he's averaging more points per game than Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle. So, you look at that at $3,500 and say, this guy's putting up better stats than these guys that are $1,000, $2,000 more than him. It just seems too appealing to not play, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. And it's not, I think with him, it's not fluky. I mean, he has that kind of ability. What you said is it's because he always gets injured. That's the issue for Logan Thomas. It has been throughout his career. So
when he's on the field, he performs. I mean, he's solid.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I have a couple others I'll throw out. I do think either of the tight ends in that Minnesota game are playable. Komet or Hawkinson, I think could be pretty good looks there. Goddard, I don't think I'll get to Goddard for the reasons that you said, but I do think you have to pay attention to him. And then the other one, if you have to go really cheap, is I think you can consider Josh Oliver from the Vikings. I wonder if he's going to get more playing time also. You kind of don't know what the Vikings are going to do with their offense with Jefferson down, and they like Oliver a lot. And I know that he is primarily a blocking tight end, but he has gotten some opportunities to catch the ball as well. And he's $2,500. So I think, like, honestly, if I had to go between he and Powell, who I mentioned with the receivers, I think I'd go Oliver. I think the chances of him getting opportunities are bigger, and he's $2,500. So someone just to keep in mind if you need something. All right, let's do defense, and then let's build some lineups. We'll do defense quick here. You paying up, going in the middle, trying to get something from the bottom, a little bit of each.
There's no necessarily defenses that I'm in love with this week, really, at any price point. I think at the high end, the Eagles to me are the play, or obviously the Niners. I mean, I know that Deshaun Watson hasn't played well, but it looks like they're probably not even rolling with Watson, at least the last I saw. And we know that Niners defense is good. I mean, it's a cross-country game. It could be a little bit of a letdown spot, but it's hard not to see San Fran, blowing that offense up a little bit. And then if the Eagles, as I said, I mean, I know Zach Wilson's played a little bit better the last couple of weeks here since he had that nice primetime performance. But I think that Eagles defense, the Jets just lost Elijah Vera Tucker on their offensive line. There could be a lot of sacks in this game. We know Wilson is prone to throw an interception. So I think that, the Eagles are definitely a possibility. I do think the Dolphins, even though they aren't a great defense, they do rush the quarterback pretty well. And when you're playing against a rookie, we said there could be some interceptions. This, as a home game, could be one of those pick six type games. So I think the Dolphins are definitely an option there. And then I think you drop down a little bit there and, you start looking at where do you go from there? I don't necessarily love a lot really in the middle tier. I think that the Patriots, as bad as they've been, I think you could consider them just because of the price point at $2,600. And I know they haven't been good. I know they're missing some key pieces there. And I know the Raiders can put up some points. But I feel like in a game like this where Belichick knows Jimmy Garoppolo, kind of knows that offense, he might be able to scheme up some sacks, that kind of a thing. So I don't know, you kind of look at that and say, is that an option? But to be honest with you, I mean, defense for me this week is really tough. So I know for me, I tried to build my lineups and figure out what defense I could fit in there on the back end rather than, sometimes I'll start with a defense. I think that week we started with the Browns. I started my lineups there. This week's the opposite. I'm kind of going and seeing what I can have. Can I afford to get the Eagles in there? But I know, like I said, I have the Dolphins in a lineup as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel incredibly strongly. So for me, it's San Francisco if you can fit them. I like Atlanta against Washington. I mean, you can't ignore the sacks and all that kind of stuff. And so, but they're expensive still, $3,600. And then the other one that I've found myself going to some is Cleveland. I know they're playing the 49ers, but they're $2,200. They're one of the cheapest defenses. And for me, the play becomes at that point, I think this is a good defense. Is it a good matchup? No, it's not a good matchup. But I think it's a good defense, and I'm getting them super cheap. So that's the other one that I'm looking to on the bottom end. So
Cleveland makes sense. It's like San Francisco. They don't turn the ball over. Like they don't, it's like Purdy doesn't get sacked. It's just so hard. Even though you could argue that Cleveland's a top 3 or 4 defense when they're healthy, And it's at home. I mean, you could definitely make that argument because on most weeks they're going to be priced substantially higher than that.
Yeah, totally. But I'm with you. I'm building the rest of my lineup and seeing where I'm at.
Yep.
All right, so here's what I did over the last few minutes is I felt like there were some spots that we really kind of agreed and people we liked. So I built out most of a lineup here, and I want to throw it at you and see if we can play with it, kind of what you think, if there are pieces you'd switch out.
Sure.
So we're going to go with that Gardner Minshew stack, and we'll do something with Stafford here too, but I thought let's start with Minshew. So Minshew, Downs, and Pittman. So all three of them. And then run it back with Ridley from the other side. Okay, so that's the Jacksonville piece. Running back, we go to Williams. So we get Williams from the Rams and Kamara, which I think were the two that we kind of both liked at the top. We get Thomas at tight end, who we both said has the most upside. And then from there, this is where you could play with it some. What I threw in for now is Puka Nacua as the flex. And then the Commanders defense, because we had $3,100 left once I put Puka in. But basically, you've got 11,100 for a flex. And let me first say, overall with that roster, do you like where that went? Are there pieces you would prefer to switch out, do you think?
No, I like that a lot. I mean, the only thing I think in my mind that you could maybe think about doing if you wanted to, if you didn't want to put all your eggs in the Colt basket there, and you don't want to stack it, you could potentially swap out Pittman, and whatever. But I think that in this case, you're banking on the fact that Minshew is going to have a good game. So I think you could play Minshew as a one-off quarterback and really try to load the rest of your roster. But I think if you're playing Minshew, you kind of have to do Pittman and Downs and hope that he connects.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I like Ridley coming back the other way, like you said. I think we were aligned on Thomas there. I think we talked about Nacua and Kupp. So, I mean, Nacua certainly slots in there. Overall, I like it. And obviously the running backs you mentioned, I think I love Williams this week. Kamara should have a big game. So overall, I mean, I think that's again, it's kind of like that when we did the Zach Wilson Jets thing. You're relying on Minshew and Downs. But if they can do it, you're probably scoring a lot of points with that lineup if Indianapolis can hold their own with Jacksonville there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You need that thing to happen. Let me ask you this. Would you rather have Puka, Jamar Chase, or Brown? I mean, we didn't really talk about Brown. I don't think either of us were super high with the matchup this week. But so let's just say Chase or Nacua. Who would you prefer to have?
I feel like Chase would be the better option, especially if Higgins is out. But even if Higgins is in, I just think that, first of all, he's obviously heated up with Burrow, like we said. Nacua, do I think he's still going to produce? Absolutely. But I worry that, we saw Kupp and that was his first game back. Like, we could see even more of that. And, obviously if Williams is running well, how much is there to go around? So it's like, it's almost like you're banking on, okay, I need the Rams to run the football in this game with this lineup. So that would be if I had to pick between Nacua and Chase, I would pick Chase.
After I did it, I had a similar thought of, if we're going to have Williams at running back, maybe you don't want to play a Rams receiver. And I like Jamar Chase better too. I think that's a great one-off here. So at defense, then you have 2,800 left. Here's what you have to choose from: Jets, Lions, Patriots, Bears. Those are the top four at the price point.
I mean, to me, I think you go Lions or Patriots. I mean, probably Lions, just in the simple sense that their defense is playing pretty well. I know obviously Tampa's played pretty well as far as Baker hasn't turned the ball over a lot, but I don't know. I mean, I think if you ask me those options, I would probably lean Lions. I don't know if you agree.
I would for sure.
Okay.
I like the New England thing from the coaching perspective, the Garoppolo turns it over, but with the guys they have out right now, I'm just not excited to play the Patriots defense. So
yeah, too many injuries. I hear you.
Yep. All right, let's we haven't gone too long tonight. We're not even to 50 minutes yet. Let's do that Stafford stack quick and see what we like there, because I think that was the other one we were interested in. So I think we're in agreement. We want to try to get Stafford, Kupp, and Nakua if we're using Stafford, right?
I think so.
Okay. Which is obviously expensive, but do you want to play any Cardinals? I mean, here we're probably talking Brown, Rondale Moore, or Ertz are the three that I would assume we're going to pick from if we're going to play one.
To me, I think the other guys are too big of long shots for me. Unless we get to a point where we just need somebody to plug in. I think Hollywood Brown is an option. What was he? 50? What was
he's 5,300.
53. I mean, you could potentially put him in if you want to run it back. And I mean, I think again by default, like you said, he kind of grabs the target share there, and he's the one that's likely to do damage for that offense.
Yep. Fair. All right, I'm going to put him in for now. And if we need to get cheaper at receiver, we can switch him out.
Yep.
Just for the sake of seeing how much we can get in, I'm going to throw in the Browns defense for now. Browns or Bucks? Who would you prefer?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily love either of those.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I would say probably the Bucks between the two, just because again,
right.
I don't think San Francisco, they just,
they don't turn it over for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just throw them in as a placeholder. We'll try to get to something more, but just to get a sense of how much money we have left. Do we want to go back to Logan Thomas again at tight end? Just run with him?
To me, yes, because I mean, like you said, you could save a few $100s, but the drop off there to me becomes substantial. I'm all in on Logan Thomas this week, and I'm living and dying with him.
I'll ride the train with you. So here's what we've got. We need 2 running backs and a flex, and our average is about $5,200 per position. So what do you got?
I mean, I think KJ Osborne to me is the guy that I'm plugging in there, to give you a little cushion there.
And then we're up to 5,700 average. So we could probably get to one of the guys we like. Well, what about Algier? Do you think he's a little bit cheaper?
And we have two running backs to fill? Is that what
we need 2 running backs? Yeah, we need 2 running backs, and it's 5,700 each. So the only way to get up to some of those in the 6,000s is to get somebody cheaper. Him or Foreman, probably.
Yeah, I was gonna say Foreman if you wait until Sunday, or if you want to put Algier in as a placeholder. I think if the Bears starting 3 backs are out, or even if 2 of those 3 are out, I think Foreman becomes the start there. If not, I think Algier is fine at that price point.
All right. I'm going to put in Foreman, and I think this is one where you just have to kind of bookmark it and come back. And I think you could know, hey, Algier is an okay option. And so if I need to pivot, I've got somebody in that price range that I probably don't have to change my whole lineup up. So that gets us all the way up to $7,000. So we probably can get one of the running backs we like and get a better defense. We're probably not going to go to Williams here with doing a Rams stack, I would assume, correct?
I probably not. I mean, you could, but I think you're expecting 50 points from the Rams at that point, which could happen against Arizona.
It's
but
possible, right?
Yeah, I think at that point, kind of the opposite, where we were like, let's play Williams, not Nakua. I think in this case, you don't go to Williams. I think you're better off with whoever you like here. I mean, you can put Mostert in here. Again, I think half of the world will probably be playing Mostert, so you got to consider that. But obviously, if you play him, he's at 6,400. You could beef up your defense. You can go back to Kamara at that point if you want to do that. I mean,
Walker.
Kenneth Walker is an option there. So I mean, it's really your call on what you would want to do there. And I mean, if you play Mostert and you want to take a shot with a defense, normally I don't recommend that, but I mean, you could get into those higher end defenses there. And I mean, there's a chance that a Philly or a San Fran defense could put up a lot of points this week.
So I think here's the choice with this. So if I put in Mostert for now, along with Foreman, we have $2,900 left. So we're back to that like Cincinnati, Detroit, whatever. The other option though, that we talked about earlier is you could take Hollywood Brown out. And he's 5,300. So if you can drop down below 5,300, which I think we both like Downs in that range, is probably what we're dropping down to there. Then you can get one of those. So I think like if you had to pick Downs and say the 49ers even, or the Eagles, or Brown and the Lions, which are you more interested in?
Well, I have another thought, and the only reason I
Okay.
don't like the Downs idea is because we have him in our other lineup. So if Downs
Right.
doesn't perform, we're hit twice there.
Yeah, probably not a good place.
Yeah, I mean, what about DeAndre Swift at the running back option? I mean, that's a $6,100 option. That would get us to what, 3,400 on defense?
That gets us to 32.
32. Okay, so
that gets us to the Colts. I mean, Commanders, maybe.
Yeah.
The Commanders were a defense I considered too, just because, yes, Ritter had one good game, but he's also had a lot of potential interceptions. So I think that's something to consider. Yeah, after that, and I don't think there's anyone else at running back in that immediate area. I mean, you don't really want to play Breece Hall this week.
No, and I don't think you want to drop down to like Stevenson or that. I don't think.
Right, it's Madison or Stevenson in that next range down.
Well, I almost would go back to Kamara and go with was that our who did we have in there where you said we had 7,000 left if we did that?
Yep. So you can get to Kamara, and then you still have 2,500. So you can go Bears, Cardinals, Bucks. Probably in this one, we're not going to go with the Cardinals. So it's Bears or Bucks, probably. I think Bucks. I don't mind the Bucks.
No.
I think I actually like our first lineup a little better as it stands right now. But
I like them both, honestly. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I picked guys I like, but I like them both.
Yeah. I think we'd like them, right?
These are Billy Maker winners, man. Come on.
That's right. Let me read this one back for people too. So it's the Rams stack with Stafford, Kupp, and Nakua, and then you're bringing it back with Hollywood Brown. You got Deontay Foreman, and this is again where you do have $200 to play with. How much more was Algier than Foreman?
200. I think he was 4,600.
$200. So if you needed to just swap to Algier, you wouldn't even have to change this lineup at all. You could just swap Foreman out for Algier. Then you got Kamara. Your tight end is Thomas. Your flex is KJ Osborne, and then the defense is Tampa Bay. So yeah, I like it, man. I think both these lineups have pretty good upside. I'm saving them both to my 2 of my 4 lineups. So
there you go.
All right, man. Well, that's another week of DFS in the books. Hopefully we'll have a good one. One of these weeks, we need to break out and win a big one. So
it could be this week. Hey, listen, the Colts, maybe. The Rams, maybe. Let's see. I like it. I do get more or less excited about lineups, and these both to me seem potentially really good. So, all right, man. Well, thanks a lot for talking through the slate again, and have a good night, and we'll be talking again soon. Appreciate you having me. We'll talk to y'all later.